Yeah. Oh, it's. What happened with this?
Oh. Return order. It's. Except for the owl.
Okay, I think it was my computer somehow broadcasting through the projector, which I didn't know it could pick up.
Sure, it's not typical, is it?
Let me share this.
Yeah. No. There's a sign up list that's gonna be coming around. So
Show it.
Yeah. To it, that would be great. Okay, I think we're ready. You're recording? Yeah. Okay.
Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order, the special select board meeting for today on May 31. At 624 Grassy Brook Road. The purpose of the meeting is singular, and that's to discuss bridge culvert 11 in town and various options to address some of the structural needs or needs of that and to receive feedback from anybody and everybody. But first I'd like to make a motion to of the select board to turn the meeting over to David as moderator for today's meeting. May I have a second for that motion? Bruce seconds the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of turning the meeting over to David to moderate today's meeting signified by saying aye. Aye. It's unanimous. David, please facilitate our meeting.
Okay, great. As Mike said, the meeting today has two purposes, really. One is for the select board to present to the public the information that they have concerning the Stone Island Bridge on Hill Road. And secondly, it's an opportunity for the public to comment, ask questions of the board. So there's an exchange of information that occurs to them. This is strictly an informational meeting. There's not going to be any decision made at the conclusion of this meeting or during the meeting. That will come at some later point in time that we don't know. The board is going to do a short presentation first, about 20 minutes in length. I'd ask you to hold your questions during that time period. Let them run through the information they have, present that. If you have a question occurs to you, I'd ask that you write it down so you don't forget. And the board has made it very clear to me that they want to make sure that by the time that everybody leaves today, that everybody who wants to say something has an opportunity to do that.
No, there's no.
So if you do, we'll run through the board's presentation first, and once they finish, then we'll go over a few parameters for questions and things. Does that sound okay? That's very good. Good.
Before you start, Emily, could I ask JDB on the call in to identify yourself for the attendance?
Yeah, this is John Baloo.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well, if I can add one thing, shoot, David, we have Brian Post online. He is an expert in the field that we're dealing with and will be he's welcome to provide input during the meeting. Great.
I think I saw Mary Hickey might have been on
Yeah,
as
so
well.
also on the Zoom are Mary Hickey, Brian Post, and John Blue.
Okay.
Good. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming on a rainy morning. I have put together some information on the history and the status of the bridge and some of our options, and I will try and get through that as quickly as I can. But like David said, it'll probably be about 20 minutes. I don't know why this is not full screen the great way, but it should work. So as you know, the bridge is located on Hill Road. Stan has gone through our town documents and come up with a probable history for the bridge. So the first record we have of the structure, it appears to have been built by the Cutler family in the early 1930s or 1830s, excuse me. And then J.O. Follett added on in 1901. We have town records that show a payment to him of $37 for Stone Bridge. And that little snapshot on oh, yes.
We're not seeing your screen.
Can you see it, Doug?
Yeah, I can see it.
I see it as well.
You may have to play around with your.
Yep. Okay. I'll play around with it. Thanks. Sorry.
No problem. So, right, the snapshot on the bottom is of the record. Drawn in favor of J.O. Follett. We're building bridge stone on Cutler Brook, $37. Currently, the structure is not listed on historic registers. You'll hear more about a grant later. A historic review is part of the grant process, so we're aware of that, and it's inevitable if we go with the grant. Also, I believe there's some citizens here today working on historic registers from another angle, and hopefully they'll tell us more about that today. Another very important piece of information is that it is currently 8 feet wide, which is below state standards. We had a hydraulic study done, and it's required to be 12 feet wide. So that means it's undersized in the event of a big flood event or rain event. It's vulnerable. The bridge was damaged in 2023 in a high water event. There's 4 sort of important sections of the bridge that we're going to run through because they're all in different conditions. So first is the downstream outlet section, which is what you see in all the pretty pictures. It is well built and reasonably sound. The majority of mortar is missing, but that doesn't appear to be causing major problems. The middle section is also stonework, and this is where some of the big problems are. It was poorly constructed and there's numerous poorly placed stones. In particular, a large stone was pushed forward and is now out of place, and it's precariously balanced. If it shifts, much of the rest of the bridge is resting on it. That center section is vulnerable to collapse. Also, it appears that water is flowing through the upstream wing wall and washing back out through this section, which is a bit of a problem as well. So the south side of the middle section is nearing collapse. It needs to be rebuilt. And this is a quote from one of the reports. It's very unstable. That picture is that big rock that's out of place. You can sort of tell it's protruding there. The upstream inlet section is the concrete section. It appears sound and sturdy, though it was noted that water is flowing under the concrete, which might merit a small repair there. The issue here is we can't determine its strength. We just don't know how much steel is in the concrete, so it's hard to know how strong that really is. And then lastly, we have the headers, wing walls, and spandrels, which is the whole rest of the bridge that's not the arch. And this is in very poor condition. Some spots are better, but it really should be rebuilt. And you can see on the right side of that photo where those stones are slanting and out of place. It's an example of that. So we've come up with 5 options and it ranges from doing nothing to completely rebuilding it. So I will go through each one of those in turn and talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each. So repair only would be a targeted repair of the sections nearing collapse. Hello, everyone. There's chairs up there. Feel free to grab them. I'm gonna keep talking though. So we would rebuild the south wall of the center section. We would rebuild all of the wing walls and maybe add some concrete below the concrete section to stop wall. This does not include repainting, which would be really a neat job because you can't just repoint the inside of the bridge. You have to dig it out and do it from the top as well. Otherwise, you'll just trap water in the stones. So the major advantage of this approach is that it preserves the existing structure. With, I think, a short interruption of being used, but perhaps Brian can tell us more about that because I'm not a stone expert. The disadvantages here are that we cannot determine the strong. It will be continuous repair. And importantly, this doesn't mitigate the size issue. So the bridge would remain 8 feet when we need 12. So that means there's a high likelihood of damage from future flooding, both to the bridge, the road, and to surrounding properties. The next option is to repair and mitigate with a bypass culvert. So we would do everything I just talked about, and then we would also install a large culvert to the north of the bridge, which would relieve flood water pressure on the bridge. So water would flow through the bridge at a reduced speed and hypothetically be less likely to be further damaged. So advantage here is it preserves the existing bridge, but there's a lot of disadvantages. So it is not an ideal design from a water engineering perspective because it increases the complexity of the stream channel and changes it. We've been told from the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, this is highly disfavored. They've sort of indicated they might let us do it if we really, really want to, but they've seen other towns do it and it goes poorly. I think we may even have a statement from them that you're better off doing nothing than doing this. But it is an option, so we didn't want to take it off the table for you guys. The other big disadvantage here is that it would require work to be done outside of the town right of way on land we have no present right to. So neighboring landowners would need to be approached. They would need to allow this. Maybe they sell us land, we buy an easement. I don't know how that would work, but it would be potentially very expensive and lengthy. And it's a little bit difficult to predict what those costs are. And it's asking a lot of our neighbors. Additionally, we'll be creating an additional structure, so we'll need to repair or replace that at some point. We'll need to maintain it. There may be more maintenance after flooding events because we'll have 2 channels to clean, but those are, I think, smaller downsides than the first 2. So the next one is we could scrap it all and replace it with a conventional concrete structure. So we dismantle the bridge and place a 12-foot wide standard concrete box culvert. Advantages here is that it's a modern structure built to state hydraulic standards. The structural strength of these is well understood, and the disruption of use would probably be relatively short. The disadvantages are that it completely erases the historic structure. It is the least environmentally sustainable approach. Concrete's just not a very sustainable building material, and it has a lifespan. So in ideal conditions, concrete lasts about 90 to 100 years. That probably takes us past all of our lifespans, but it's something to think about if we want to build resilient and long-lasting structures. Next, we could replace it with an expanded stone arch bridge. So we would dismantle the existing bridge, build a new one that would meet state standards at 12 feet wide. We would reuse the stone that's currently there to be repurposed into the spandrels and wing walls, and the arch barrel will probably be built with granite. Advantages here is that we can build it to a known engineered strength and design load. It would meet state standards. It's more environmentally sustainable than the concrete option since we'd be reusing materials and not using as much concrete. It would also pay homage to the history of the site by being a stone bridge. It would support traditional craftsmanship practices and has a much longer lifespan than concrete. So a well-built stone structure lasts more than 200 years with proper maintenance. Disadvantages is that no part of the existing historic structure will remain intact, though it will be reused. and a potentially lengthy disruption of use here. Again, maybe Brian can talk about that when I'm finally done speaking. Lastly, we could do nothing except monitor it. If we don't make a decision, we might end up in this camp, so it's worth putting it up on the screen and talking about it. We would just keep watching it. If that large stone that we talked about earlier shifts further, we would recommend closing the bridge until reinforcement can be added, because it would likely cause a collapse. So as an advantage, there's no initial cost to the town or disruption of use, but the structure is vulnerable to collapse. And it remains undersized, so another storm could take it out. And importantly, we might lose opportunity to address the structure with FEMA grant funding. Talk more about grant funding in a minute, but we've been working on one that's a 90-10 grant, meaning FEMA would pay 90%, we would pay 10%, which is a very favorable grant term. A lot of them are and have the town paying more, so then it might be 80-20 or 50-50. 90-10 is pretty good. And if we opted for number 5, we would be abandoning that grant that we're working on. All right, estimated costs, so the money slide. These sort of speak for themselves. I'm not going to go over it. I do want to mention these are estimated project costs. So they're put together based on what our experts have told us in our experience, but they're just basically educated guesses at this point. As you know, prices are fluctuating wildly. Some of our numbers are a little bit old, and we won't be able to get a really exact number until we pick an option, put out requests for proposals, and get bids back. But what I think this will show you is the relative costs. So you can see number 1, repair only, is a significant cost. It's not an afternoon and a couple $1,000s. It's a big undertaking. Also, I'd ask you to notice that number 3 and 4, the 2 replacement options, are in the same price range. It's not the case that one is significantly more expensive than the other. There's one other note about this. Oh, if you've been looking at the reports on our website, you might notice that these numbers are a little different than what you see in some of those reports. That's because we didn't want to give you apples and oranges. So if one expert included paving in their estimate and one didn't, we'd make small adjustments to try and get those to be more comparable. But again, these are estimated costs, or no promises. Okay. All right, and now with the grant. So these are the estimated costs to the town if the grant is available. It's just 10% of the bigger number. The IF is doing a lot of work here. So with FEMA, these grants are very technical. There's a lot of requirements. It is possible that as we move forward with that, they will say, nope, we won't reimburse this option, but we'll reimburse another one. At this point, I think it's worth talking about all of these as possibilities, but I'm mentioning this because I don't want you to take away from this presentation. Emily said FEMA will fund all of these things, and later we tell you that they won't. We just don't know. We've done, we, meaning Stan, has done a lot of communication with FEMA, and it can be difficult to deal with the agencies. But for today, I think we should think about them as if they're all on the table. That being said, consider what you would do if we don't have a grant as well. I think those are very important. What would we do if we get a 90-10 grant, and what will we do if grant funding is not available? A little bit more on FEMA. I know there's a lot of uncertainty with them right now. There's been a lot of press coverage about FEMA's programs being cut. Our program is a PA program, it's public assistance. To our knowledge, that has not yet been cut. So if you remember news articles from the past few weeks, or you see something upcoming, look for the PA program. So a lot of FEMA programs are cut, but as far as we know, the PA program issue has not been cut. We've also been advised that Vermont actually already has the FEMA money that would supply our grant. So I put in the names of the people who told us this. Again, we can only communicate what's being told to us. We don't have a crystal ball, we don't know exactly what's happening, but everyone we're working with in Vermont and at FEMA are operating as though this is still happening. They want information. We got an email from them yesterday. So this is reassuring to me. Who knows what's going to happen, but we wanted to share with you what we've been told. Of course, we'll remain vigilant here. If the grant evaporates, we're not going to act like we still have access to this money when we don't. And I want you to know that with these grants, they're contract based. So we would not start any work until we have a contract that's signed by the town, FEMA, and the Vermont Emergency Management Department. So that would include a verification that the funds are available for appropriate reimbursement. We will be very careful here because we don't want to sign on to a big project with a grant and then end up having that grant disappear. Next, a little bit of context that I think is important for you to have. The Stone Arch Bridge is just one of many, many pieces of town infrastructure. There are about 8 to 10 other large culverts in the town that need attention on the scale, like a $300,000 project. In addition to many, many smaller projects, culverts and otherwise. The total project cost for just those large projects is something like $2 to $3 million. We obviously cannot pay for that out of pocket. The board would seek to fund that in large part by grants over the next 10 to 15 years or longer. But I include this because I think it's important to think about what else the town needs when we're making a decision here. So I think we need to evaluate every project in this larger context and very carefully allocate our limited resources according to the town's priorities, especially when there's no grant funding. And we need to build resilient structures to minimize ongoing maintenance and repair costs, especially when there is grant funding to cover the initial construction. And on those priorities, this is a list we put together based on things that have come up in our conversations about what the town could prioritize. I would love for you to think about these, and if there's other ones that should be on the list that aren't here, please tell us. And think about how we should prioritize these as well. Of course, in most situations, you can't have everything you want. I think all of those things are great things that we want every time, but it's not always possible. So when rubber meets road, what should we prioritize over other things? I'd love to hear from you on that. And that's all. Thanks so much to Stan for his continued assistance with this project. If I had his job, I think I'd have pulled all my hair out by now. So thank you very much for doing that.
This is really a toupee.
We really appreciate your persistence on this. And thank you, Brian Post, for being here. I am going to stop talking now because I talked for too long, but I think we have Brian for about an hour. So we should maybe prioritize questions for him up front. I know I have a few, but I will take a break from speaking. Does anyone else have something to add?
I think we'll,
Good, great,
So,
back to
any
you.
board members have anything to contribute to this section at all? The nice one.
No, I'm the stuff that's related to buying specific.
Right, just add one other thought, in my short experience here, we have not proven to be great at securing grants. I personally have not been. And so my bias is, or my feeling is that, you know, to the extent that these FEMA monies hang on, they're there. We don't have to fill out, well, Stan has to fill out a lot of pieces of paper, but we don't have to fill out grant applications and hope somebody decides to give us the money. It's more, we're downstream of that. It's if the money's there, we just need to check all their boxes and meet their criteria for them. We're not competing with another town for the same dollars. It's just compliance with all of their red tape. So that's, I just throw out that once that money, if we opt not to take any of that money, then we either have to pay ourselves 100% or try to find another grant somewhere and compete with somebody else who wants that same money. So I just throw that as an advantage of doing something with one of those, whatever number of options where we actually took some FEMA money.
In my conversations with state officials and nonprofits, the expectation is that the next 4 years will be very light on grant funding. A lot of grants from the type of work comes from the federal government, and that's very uncertain right now. So they're even giving advice to towns saying, all right, you're not going to get a grant in this time. Do your work to get all your ducks in a row so that when money comes back, you are ready to go grab it. We're in a kind of a unique situation where this money actually still is here. And if we move quickly, I think that's a really important part, is to know what our decision is quickly, we might still have access to it. But yes, deciding to abandon that grant would be a big loss.
If you have a question, or comments that you would like to make, I'd ask that you raise your hand and identify yourself. And then go ahead and ask your question or make your comments. Robert's limits normally to a 10-minute speaker time, and it seems to me anyways reasonable for today. If something needs to run more than, I'm not going to sit here with a watch. Number one, I didn't bring a watch, and number two, I didn't bring my phone. So I'm not going to be timing anything and cutting anybody off, but if we could just try to keep comments concise and to the point, and please address your comments to me and make sure that we stay civil. And it's never been a problem here in Brookline as long as I've been doing this job. So I figure that will continue today. So, question or comment? Dan Towler first, and then Maura.
Thank you, Dan Towler. I guess my first question will be, with Brian posted, even that he's heard so far this morning, in place with his best information or his findings. And then I have a couple of questions about the FEMA grant situation.
Okay, so I would ask Brian, if there's something that you would like to contribute at this moment.
Sure. I guess in terms of the project time frame, that was one thing that was brought up there. If we're doing the repair work, you're probably looking at closing that the bridge section of the road for probably a few weeks at most. And if we were doing a full replacement of the bridge with stone, it would probably be in the range of like 6 to 10 weeks. Could probably 10 weeks is stretching it, probably 6 to 8 weeks. Other than that, I think that, the summation report the town did was excellent in terms of presenting the options and their various merits and challenges. So happy to answer any further specific questions, but.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. I noticed Ryan's appendix A is projected expense of repairing the most needy sections is 48 to 75,000, and I believe the town's presentation said 68 to 95. Does that include, the town's estimate include repaving, or?
Yes. We added paving costs in, and I think there's also a guardrail in there. So that's why they're up a little bit. Also, I should note, Brian did do a revised report that went up on Thursday on our website. The numbers didn't change that much to my recollection, but just letting you guys know if you've been looking at the early report that there is okay, great. And I think for the, also the mitigation option, we included $8,000 for legal expenses. That's just a guess. It could be way more than that or less than that, but that's why some of those are a little bit different.
Okay, go ahead.
Also, the FEMA money, I've seen it written where the grant was 75-25, 90-10, 80-20. Are we 100% certain that what we're talking about is a 10% share on the town's part here?
Yes, I think that's the terms of the public assistance grants are 90-10.
We've done all of the 3 important things that are required to obtain that. We have a current town plan. We have a hazard mitigation plan. Mark and Archie were timely in the filing of the TA 60 papers that are an annual certification, and we're following state codes. And there's one other thing, and we have done those, and because of that, we go from an 80-20 category to a 90-10 category. So And to follow that statement up in a conversation with the Vermont Emergency Management staff, where there were 3 individuals there, who, if there was a difference or a feeling of different sentiment, I would assume, said something. The primary individual indicated that based on what we've done so far, we are in the 90-10 category. So it looks, all indications are, I'm starting to take record those conversations because I don't know what's gonna happen in 6 months. But I do have emails, and every conversation that I've been able to, I've taped. I think that's one I've got taped. So I'm pretty confident. I think that Emily at the town is pretty confident in that posture right now.
Just one other thing, I'm also wondering if, we have assurance that FEMA will pay their end of the grant if we are talking about repair versus replacement. So in other words, just repairing or replacing the old 80 sections for this, total rebuild.
It's a great question. I want to not get too technical in the grant requirements now. There's like a 50% rule. There's a bunch of rules that come into play. It may be the case that if repair costs are low, they won't let us replace it and they'll only say yes to repair. I think there might be ways through that. And so for today's purposes, it is worth thinking about, what do we do in best case scenario? What do we do in worst case scenario? I think if we got too technical on what the grants say, we could just do that all day, and that may not be super productive. But yeah, there's questions there for sure. Yes, Sam.
Without appearing to overpromise anything, and the conversations and emails that I had with the appropriate people, to include the new FEMA regional director who took over the role of the various people in Vermont from FEMA that were designated to certain towns. This guy covers all of New England now. One person. I don't know how they're doing. But the last communications that I had along that very concept, Dan, was, there's repair and there's complete replacement. Where do we fall in this? How does that affect funding? Their answer has been, tell us what you want to do, which is partly the purpose of this meeting today, and we'll work with you to try to do it. That's paraphrasing it, but there's been no comment that, well, if you go this route, we can't play with you on that, only but up to a certain point. It is, tell us what you want, put it in writing. We may ask you for engineering documentation, and then we will work with you to sort through what it is we will and will not do, which is another reason why don't hang too much on some of the numbers, because the costs may go up, they may cover it. Costs may go down, that would make everybody happy. So those fears don't seem to, I have not sensed anything to allay any fears that anyone might have that would indicate they're going to pull the rug out under us if we go one route versus another. So they appear to be looking at everything equally, to try to be, amazingly, given who we have in the White House, to try to be as fair as they possibly can to the town thus far.
More, David, may I just make a comment on that question?
Yes.
So just to repeat something that Emily said earlier, what I envision is we're gonna have to pick one of these paths. We're gonna continue down that path, and we're gonna have this moment of truth where it's come to a contract situation where they say we'll pay for this, and this. Let's say it's exactly as we anticipate. We sign it, okay, we lock in. If we get to that point and the game has changed and the sands have shifted, we may then decide, well, we're not going to sign that. We're going to have to back up. So the word assurance and 100% and all that stuff probably doesn't apply right now, but we're going to have to try to get to that point before we sign. Is my thing where we'll go. More.
Hi, I'm Maura, and I know this may be, we haven't decided what we're doing, but I think we need to also think of the impact of the people that are living there, because I live right there, and the school bus. Because there's a stop on our side and their side, if they're doing it during the school year. That will mess up the whole thing, so that's also something that needs to be thought of, because I don't drive and I have a child that uses that school bus. So that would really affect me if I needed to try to get her somewhere else to that, so that I think that's also something we need to think about.
Good, thank you.
May I ask what, so since you live there, you heard the presentation. If you're the king or queen for the day, would you, is there one that jumps out?
Say repair, I would go with repair myself. Just because it's gonna cut back the time, it sounded like the time would be shorter. And it's beautiful, I mean, I was there, we were there for Irene, and it did damage then. And that's probably when the stone shifted, because it really flooded down in that area. And, but it didn't affect us. So when you're saying the flooding and affecting, it was to the bridge, it was to the top at times. And I know it did damage, but it stuck through that, and the flooding since too, so.
Thank you.
Dot,
I got that, yeah. I have a question for Mr. Post, and then to give my 2 cents as to the chart that you put up, the choices that we had. Brian, in your report, and I'm not sure if you updated it after Thursday, you said there's a new one on Thursday, but several times in the report, it says that a post-snow visit is necessary because some of the bridge workings were inaccessible. And I was there in February, very cold day, and there was ice and snow and everything. Have you gone back and reevaluated it since the February visit?
Yes, I did. I went back, I believe it was May 17th, and I was able to investigate, the lower regions of the bridge really thoroughly, without the ice and snow, and the water was fairly low. So the updated report does share that. I was initially concerned about on the downstream end, on that south side, that it looked like things might have been shifting, or perhaps getting undercut. And when I went back, that wasn't the case. It's actually quite well built, and there's large slabs of stone that are underneath the bottom course of stonework in the bridge, and come out into the stream bed, which is called a scarcement. And that's correct building, and it keeps it from getting undercut. So it's actually in quite good shape on that original portion of the bridge.
And the other thing was, according to the list that Emily had, thank you, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much, very informative. Well, you were listening, a couple of things that you might want us to see. The first thing I would say as a resident of Newfane is that number one is safety. When I was there in February, one of the things that I heard Brian Post say was that it could be a catastrophic collapse could occur at any time if there was a shift in the rocks. So looking at a safe bridge, looking at maintaining the safety standards of a 12-foot standard roadbed would be my number one priority. The second one is the tax burden. If we have the ability to maintain that 90-10 FEMA grant to finance the repairs or replacement of that bridge, I think that is obviously the way to go and be making good use of the town's finances, of which we need to start budgeting additional monies for more emergency. The town only has $20,000 in our emergency fund, which is not much for a town this size, and that we've only done that contribution in 1 year. The third thing would be the historical value of the bridge, and I think that's one of the things that our community has got together on, is looking at it. It is a beautiful bridge. However, if there was a possibility of doing the replacement, expanding the Stone Arch Bridge and numbering the stones at the outlet side, so that if they were put into a new construction, that aesthetically it would look like the stone arch facade, to maintain the historical feature. However, because most of that bridge has been altered in the 1960s, it's not truly considered a fully historic bridge. So I could see us mimicking that, but not necessarily just trying to take back each stone out, number it, and putting back a full stone arch bridge. And I realize you're looking at a 200-year expansion, you know, was something that could take 6 to 10 weeks. So I'm looking either between option number 3 and 4 that you had it as my main things, and the rest will all fall into place. So safety, tax burden, historical appearance, however, making something that's more modern and up to date.
Roger.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for all the work that has been done to look at the safety and durability. I think we're all concerned about road safety in the town and all that over the years. I grew up there. My family's farm abutted that for years. My father was road commissioner for many years. I just the winter roads with my uncle was roads and town roads. And the most of that bridge was not added. The third part was added in the 60s when I was away, John. So the majority of it was in place for many years. And, if you ever walked under it, which I did for my mother many times under there. And then one other things. But there's a keystone there that holds the bridge together. That's the fallen bridge. That's why it's a fallen bridge. And if you know about the fallen, he fought in Gettysburg. He came back. He was a self-made engineer. He learned how the Romans built bridges. They still last to this century because they carried weight. My father and uncle had a construction business. They had bulldozers, backhoes and dump trucks. They had a lumber mill as well. And log trucks would carry over that road. As you know, lumber for many years. I understand that things change. I understand the whole hydraulic issue that exists today. I think Brian, you indicated that overall that bridge is in pretty good condition. But there needs to be some changes made, including possibly a culvert, if that's allowable in the adjacent landowners will allow that to take place. And it needs to be monitored periodically. I think you said that on page 10, as I read it, that based on your assessment, it does not seem to be any benefits to the standard of modern engineered approach to bridges today. I remember my dad saying to me when I was growing up, I hope they never replace that bridge with a modern bridge because these art bridges will last much longer than anything that man puts in today. And that's still true if you go to Ireland, Scotland, still in many of those art bridges. They exist, they still exist, and they'll carry a lot of weight. You're lucky in this town that you have Mark Bills, who knows history well, who knows hydraulics, who knows bridge building, who has assessed that bridge, who is willing to monitor every day, every week, to see what's happening. And I hope for Selectboard and your great growth, if you have to consider and you look at what Brian has recommended, perhaps as the initial phase of repairing what's there, and possibly looking at a full litigation way of diverting it into commissioning areas. So thank you for all of it. I travel every day, so I'm concerned about safety as well.
Oh, I just wanted to, you know, mother I was, concerned about the school bus. I'm sorry, can't hear you. Oh, sorry. Could the school bus not turn around and go back down Hill Road, so we have to go across the bridge? Exactly.
But then they'd have to come all the way back around and back onto Hill Road because there's kids right on the other side of the bridge that get on.
Sorry, yeah, I'm assuming that could be mitigated in some way. Just curious. I was gonna say, most culvert work is done during the summer.
That's right.
Well, that was just what I was saying, it would be better probably during the summer, so.
Okay, down here first and then in the back. I'm sorry, I don't know your names either, so I. But yes,
Yeah, for me, and we have a historical neighbors of Rogers and First Road. And also property on Hill Road. And I think the bridge is in the category of the church. And in the category of the Brown Schoolhouse. And I think it can be tragic, taking down.
yes, in the back.
Excuse me, Kim Berger. First, I just agree and believe that Roger's points are very important and valid. And I have two questions. One is if the town did go with the 90-10 FEMA grant, does the town need to put the money up front first and then hope that they get reimbursed by FEMA? And would that be like, does the town take a loan?
So. I just wanna, there's two parts to that question, right? Do we have to put the money up first? And I think the answer is generally speaking, yes. Whether or not we have to put all the money up before we get any money back is gotta be navigated. But the second part about the hope, I wanna address the hope because I don't think we're gonna be in a hope situation. I believe when we sign a contract, that means we're gonna get the money. And we're not gonna sign a contract unless we're confident of that. So while anything could be possible, I think when we sign that contract, it's much stronger than a hope. It's very likely, is the way I would think about it. Otherwise, we won't go there. I won't vote on a hope. Doesn't mean it's 1000% secure, but it'll be pretty strong.
It seems like a lot of federal contracts will be broken. Given that
Sure.
federal contracts are being broken, but
Well, we have a contract lawyer here. She could probably address that, but
another question, and I might have missed this, I'm sorry, and since I came in a few minutes late, is how long, do you have before deciding about the FEMA grant or losing it? And my reason for asking that question is, would there be time to, work on getting, a historical designation for the bridge and then working on getting a historical society grant funding for repair and see if that came through before deciding about the FEMA grant.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Stan, go ahead,
I
Bill.
have a comment on that, which Stan, correct me if I'm wrong. So one thing is with the FEMA grants, historic review is part of that process. So there's a person in state government, who we know her name, Stan has talked to her, I believe, who would be the person responsible for doing that. So that will happen as a part of the FEMA process if you go down that road. There is also, I believe, some citizens who are working on getting it looked at as well, from another angle. So that's in process, and maybe some of them can speak to that and where they are with that today. My understanding of where we are with the FEMA grant is that we need to make a decision soon. Right now, everyone's talking to us and they're asking what we want to do, and they've been asking what we want to do for months. And if we want to go that route, I don't think nobody's given us a deadline. Nobody said you have to tell us in 2 weeks or we're gone. But I think I'm feeling some pressure here to make a decision as fast as we can while still hearing from everybody, so that we can move that process along as fast as we can. But yes, historic review will be part of that process.
And the town is agreeing to, if it is accepted, to have it listed as a historic site.
So that came up in our last select board meeting about whether we would approve that. And we decided to table it until after we got more of the historic information, because we also just among the board don't know what the impact of saying yes to listing would be. So we need to do a little research to figure that out before we make that decision for the town. So Alyssa came and talked to us about it, which was great. We didn't say no or yes. We tabled the decision to another point after this meeting. And after we can get a little more information about what it would mean for it to be on the historic register and how that would change things for the town.
I mean, Townsend has some of these fallen bridges and they have had it designated as historic landmarks, so. the information is there. For neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. John Harris, in the next 20 to 50 years, there will probably be more rainfall, more enough to water the approach. Is this to make sure that what we do with that repair or say rebuild, that you think that the tap that make sure that the volume and stability were with the high level of water through that so with better time. Anyone else? Listen.
Melissa Schmidt. I think my question for Brian and the board. That do you view the vtculverts.org information through VT Trans as valid for the condition of the culvert or in other culverts of the town?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but but I would defer to Stan anyway, because whenever I defer to Stan on most questions.
Yes, do you, or also Brian, do you look at that as a resource for conditions of the culverts and bridges in the state?
I can just respond briefly. Generally speaking, those reports are well done. And the folks that write them, I know one of the people that was involved for many years, really do a good job. Of course, the conditions change from when they inspect them to when we look at any other time. So there can be some variation there. And the caveat I would say with stone structures, the modern engineers have very little familiarity with stone. So sometimes when I look at those reports in pertaining to historic stone structures, I do disagree with their findings on condition or recommendations at times, just due to a lack of familiarity on their part with the building style or with the building type. But generally speaking, they're very good reports.
Brian, so I don't know if you saw the report for the 6611 culvert Stewart Bridge, but it is posted that the overall condition is good. The header condition is good. It needs cleaning, no. Is there erosion? Not. Do you agree with that?
I would not agree with that. I don't know off the top of my head when that report was written.
October 2nd, 2023.
Okay. From my perspective, as I wrote, there is the problem in the center of the bridge of that one stone that's severely displaced, and that's something that someone that's not familiar with the stonework might not pick up on. And in terms of the wing walls, frankly, I have to say I would be surprised, or I am surprised that they would say they're in good condition. Maybe they were just purely looking at if there was erosion at the road level. I'm not sure. But in terms of all the standards of stone construction, whether dry or mortared, I think it would be hard to say that they're in good condition.
Stanley and then Roger.
If anyone is interested in a comment response to that, I'd be happy to provide one. If not, I won't say anything more. Okay, the accuracy of Vermont culverts is suspect. My brief experience with the Wyndham Regional staff, who, from the local vantage point, maintains that list to then make sure the accuracy that goes to the state is reasonable. I have found that there are inaccuracies when the culverts were initially inspected in 2017 through 2019, the actual Wyndham County Regional staff with adults who have been in the professional business world was lacking in doing that work. It was hired out to individuals who were part-time from schools and colleges who went around and did the ratings of those things. I personally, without getting into the weeds too much, but just to give you an example, Archie and Mark replaced a culvert down near the Stankowen's house. It's that large, nice yellow house. It's just before, if you're heading south on Grassy Brook Road, before you get to the Indian Acres Ranch, that white building that's got the barn and field area for horses. There's a culvert that was put in there within the last 10 years by these two gentlemen, I believe. And when I walked the culvert with the head of Wyndham Regional's department, we noted that some of the categorizations of what had been done there, with the new work having been done, were improperly labeled. Regarding, so that was just one example. And again, looking at who did it, when it was done, on this particular culvert on Hill Road, keep in mind that the rating was truly done in 2017, 2019. There was a discussion about what that bridge or culvert was. Was it a bridge? Was it a culvert? So someone from Wyndham Regional went out and took a look at that bridge. I think it was October of 2023. And they, I believe, changed the designation from either bridge to culvert or culvert to bridge in their view at that time. So that's the date on that is relative to what it was categorized as or labeled as opposed to its condition. The condition went back to subsequent to Irene, which was 2011. I have looked at a site inspection report done by FEMA after Irene, after 2021's disaster. And the inspection report that was done by FEMA and signed off by our town indicated there was no damage to that facility, that infrastructure, as of that date, 2021. In fact, I've had to send that to FEMA to prove that the damage that did happen there happened in 2023 storm. There's a one SR inspection that says no damage on that. And then we have one where they mentioned a big stone came out, but they don't put it in the category for repair. That was an oversight on people's viewpoint. So, and of course, obviously, FEMA is looking at the current reports and putting no weight on the Wyndham Regional BT culverts status of that. We have Mr. Post. We have photos that were sent. The photos that FEMA took the day they were there, even though they said there was no damage under the bridge, show damage under the bridge. I've had to state to FEMA that look at your pictures that were taken at that time. There is damage. The labeling by the people that inspected that for FEMA was inaccurate, insufficient, incomplete. We deserve to have our bridge funded under a 90-10 scenario because there were things missed, and you should include the repair for that very reason. So, Alyssa, I place little reliability in Vermont culverts, and I suggest that anyone else who might use that do the same. It just isn't accurate. It's hard to keep up. They don't do it every year. This coincidental situation is done to labeling, as I understood it, because I was part of that process when it happened. So I hope that clarifies how much weight should be put in it, whether it's going to affect us in this scenario. No, there's so many other things contradicting it that there's no reason for them to place all their stakes or put all their eggs in the basket on something that's inaccurate and inappropriate. So hopefully that's answered some people's concerns.
Roger first and excuse me, and then March.
Yes, Brian, Stone, a question for you, being an expert. I know you worked on the Townsend bridges as well. And so some of the work that you can be from there. As you look at your report that you did on the Orange Bridge and Brookline Bridge, you indicate that you feel that the original bridge was part of Follett's work, I believe. The common Follett Bridge, that was the original bridge. In Townsend, that was the case with those arch bridges as well, being a Follett Bridge. Then I think you indicate also that modern engineers have little knowledge of stonework because they're not taught that. It's part of their granted work. And your recommendations seem to, if I could put words in your mouth, seem to indicate that work needs to be done to perhaps preserve the original bridge and perhaps provide some work to create an outlet for flood damage that may occur in the future with the hydraulic changes that are taking place in some culvert or something like that. Am I putting words in your mouth?
I'm not sure I fully understood what you were indicating there. In essence, I'm not sure precisely off the top of my head which section of this bridge Follett would have worked on, would have built. The original, what I can tell from the building of what's there now is that the most downstream side would have been the first section built of the bridge that's there now, and that the middle section would have been added onto that, and then the concrete was added onto that, and you can tell that by how the stone fits together and the concrete fits together with the stone. The most downstream section appears to me to be most similar to the style of Follett's work. So in my mind, I wonder if perhaps the original bridge that was there could have, come down, and then Follett did that section and the other sections were subsequent. It's pure conjecture on my part. The middle section of the bridge doesn't match well with what I've seen of Follett's work from that same time period. It's much more haphazardly built than what he was doing on his other bridges. Now, this is a smaller size. Maybe he wasn't being that careful. It's really pure conjecture on my part. All I can really say is that the downstream end was definitely built first. The middle section was built second. The concrete was added last. In terms of recommendations, I think that, if you're going to a full new stone arch bridge, I do have, a licensed engineer that I work with on structures, and we can have, a stone bridge that's to modern design loads. That's not a problem. It's very hard to analyze an existing stone structure because we can't see how those stones are fitting together in all regards. So that's why it's pretty much impossible to come up with a structural strength of what's there now. And in terms of recommendations, I think that, doing the repair work that I mentioned could be a good way to go. And I also think that replacing the whole structure with a new stone bridge could be a good way to go. The other options are options that may be appropriate depending on what funding is available and the regular, the rules associated with that. But otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards the idea of a bypass culvert or something like that. So I'm not 100% sure that answered all of your questions. So please follow up if I didn't get it.
I think Stan might be about to answer my question. I just wonder if it is in Follett Bridge and how do we know? Sure. Is it in a land records or anything? Understand them?
There are two things I'd like to address here. There is in the presentation earlier, I think we got it right, where I had found in the town's disbursement records a copy of a statement by the town treasurer back in 1901. where the town authorizes disbursement of $37 to Mr. Follett to build a bridge on. Interestingly, we don't know what some of our streams are labeled. It says Cutler Brook. So it's called Cutler Brook. We'll pay $37 to do it. So he built part of it, I think. And that's the only stone bridge we have, so it's gotta be one. The other comment is not to be argumentative, but Mr. Post has said something and I have a concern about it. We know, based on those of us who've gone under there, I certainly am of the opinion that the middle part of that south wall is the least professional looking section of that bridge. The spaces between the stones are large. They've got large stones in there, and then they try to use lesser, different sizes with spacing that is not tight, like the very outlet portion of that. We know Mr. Follett is self-taught. He put time into it. I've looked at some of the bridges in Townsend, the quality of his work. The stones are close. There's no gaps for water to infiltrate, or they're far less in his style of work than the center part of our Stone Arch Bridge. I hypothesize, not knowing what the training and skills of the Cutler family was, that they built the middle part of that. What I see there looks more reminiscent of someone who doesn't have the skills, hasn't built 15 or so bridges before that one. And that's the part I think was built first. And then I think Mr. Follett added the outlet end, I think last 14 feet of that 20 feet of stone, because it looks like the professions did it. Just look at the stone coming out next to the concrete portion. You got that big stone. You go down and look at the Follett end, and you've got all stones nicely put in place. And I built my own stone wall up my driveway, and I know that you can take parts of the wall apart and you can rebuild it, and you're just interleaving stones. You're just interleaving them. You're making them rest in a professional way so that not all the weight is on just one stone below it. So I'm wondering if there might be some possibility that the central part of that is where the Cutler's built, and the south end of it, or the east end of it, so to speak, toward Putney Mountain, is the end that Mr. Follett built. Because when you go back and look at what the town paid them, it doesn't say middle, doesn't say end or whatever. The only guide we have is to look at the quality of the work, the type of stones used, and I would tend to think that the middle part is the original part, for whatever that's worth. And I'm not looking to be argumentative. It's just that I know people are putting a lot of weight on that, and I see that I'm not feeling, and I don't know what Mark's thoughts are or Archie's, but I'd be interested in knowing what they think. But the middle part is not the professional part of that. It's a good effort. I think it's, period.
Bruce Mello, Brian, the state standards say 12 feet wide. Do you think that that's a generic? No, you think that that's just a standard rule and that's that?
I believe that's based on the size of the watershed upstream of the culvert and the size of the volume of water that is projected in a major flood event. It's basically a cross-sectional area that is going to be stipulated.
You're thinking that's pertaining to this bridge. This isn't a generic number that the state says, well, all bridges like this have to be 12 feet. Correct?
That is a correct summation of my understanding, yes.
Secondly, after reading this 2 or 3 or 4 times, what I saw in the reading, as I try to read between the lines, and I felt that you were pertaining a lot to the north side being in good shape. And of course, you were very critical of south side, especially in the center section. So given that the north side seems to be appearing in good shape, do you think the bypass culvert is overkill?
I would probably say that's a question that I don't know I have a good answer to. In theory, the idea of a bypass culvert is in a major water event, having additional volume will allow the speed of the water through the bridge to be less, in addition to helping to prevent overtopping of the structure. In this particular location, if the bridge was overtopped, the water is going to flow across closer to the intersection, which is a fairly gentle topography, and you might have, some washout and a lot of sediment deposited, but it wouldn't damage the structure itself just from having it overtopped, because it wouldn't be overtopped over the top of the bridge. Essentially, you have a spillway off to the side of the bridge. I guess I don't have a specific answer. I think that it's a strategy that I think used to be employed maybe more than it is currently, as indicated by the report the select board did, just due to the complexity of the channels and everything. And again, I would say, it's the approach of having a bypass culvert is really best. The only real argument for it would be as if it allows you to get funding to do the repairs on the bridge that you couldn't otherwise get. I think that would be the main argument that I would see for it. There is some logic to it, but I'm not sure that it's the best strategy. But I think maybe a hydraulic engineer might have more information on that in particular. It's a little outside of my area of expertise.
Yeah, I have to get going in a few minutes, so I just wanted to make some comments before I do it. First of all, Bruce, to your, in my field of work, I see a lot of hydraulic studies from the state. What they're based on is obviously the watershed area is one. Two is the flow, the vertical drop average in the watershed area. In other words, if the watershed area is flat, the volume may be the same, but the velocity is a lot less. Anybody that's ever traveled up Ground Main, past Lon's house, knows that there's a fair amount of vertical drop. The increased velocity erodes away structures such as this. That adds to the complexity of the project. Secondly, just for my input, if FEMA or state or whoever is willing to pay 90% of this project, in my opinion, don't screw around repairing it. It's just going to be back 10 years from now. You're going to be adding stones over here that we didn't see with Lewis, and now they are, and just do it. The storms are getting worse. They say we need a 12-foot structure. That's probably not over. Okay. It may sound awful big, but you get days like today, in a rapid succession, like you've seen in other parts of the country, maybe not right here, but if FEMA's willing to pay 10%, 90%, we're willing to pay 10%. This is just my opinion.
So being in this town years, given the historic nature of the change and trying to historic look of it, you're still under the feeling that it should be rebuilt 100%.
Yeah, I misunderstand it.
What I'm saying is you're in favor of not just the repair option, you're in favor of the rebuild to get them up.
Replacement.
I'm saying
Right.
replacement.
Thirdly, I was on the select board for years, and there was a couple decisions that were made when I was on the board that I'm not particularly proud of. And one of those is, I don't know if y'all remember when we rebuilt the Putney Mountain Bridge. In doing that, the board decided, and I believe Doug was on the board at the time. We decided to take out a 20-year bond. I believe we still have 5 years to pay on it.
Yep.
We. Looking back, I think we put a noose around our neck for 20 years. If FEMA is willing to pay, whether it's you get the reimbursement in 2 months or 6 months or 8 months, go to the bank and borrow the money, pay the contractor.
Yeah.
And don't go down the bond route. And don't do like they did in 21, where you get stripped funds from every fund you could find to pay the contractor, and then twiddle your thumbs for the next 2.5 years till FEMA decides to send a check. It put a stranglehold on this town for 2.5 years. And it's to some point, it's still put a stranglehold on these budgets. If we'd gone to the bank and borrowed the money, paid the contractor, and paid the bank back when we had the money come from FEMA, everything else in town would have gone along as it should have. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Archie.
That,
I'd like to agree with Archie on that. We were strangled with the budget because we didn't anticipate the length of time for FEMA, and to use the banking process would be the way to go. So I just wanted to talk to Bruce or David, so I'm addressing it to you. The third and fourth option. Third option was to replace it with a new 12-foot box culvert for approximately $300,000. Or item 4 would be to expand with a stone arch bridge, which would reuse the stones for the same approximate price. So you could keep the historic visual outlet and make a plan to replicate the historic outlet side of the folded design on a new stone arch bridge for the same amount. So you would have the visual part of it, but I do believe the center of it was not done by Paul. I do think it was a standard research that it was. There were 3 contributors to that bridge. You had Mr. Albee, you had Mr. Cutler,
No, it
you
was
had
not
Mr. Paul.
For fire. But they wanted to expand that third section. Their father had been road teacher, so over his dead body.
But he faced.
No, he did not. In other words, somebody did this myth. He was not involved in that. He just said they shouldn't take out the bridge because water and the fire.
Okay, I thought it was the road commissioner who declared, I'm trying to find it.
I just want to be mindful of Brian's time. He gave us an hour and it's now almost 10:20, so. Brian, if you have to go, please do, but thank you so much for coming. It's been really, really helpful to have you here, and I know everyone appreciates it, so thank you very much.
Sure, yeah, I should get running, and just a clarification, I probably my speaking wasn't clear, but I agree with what Stan said, that that downstream section is definitely what would appear to be Follett's work. The middle section is not typical of what Follett would have done. So I think we can get into the technical details, but that much I'm definitely in agreement. So at any rate, thank you all for inviting me and putting the time and effort into looking at this structure.
Thank you.
yeah, appreciate it. Any other audience members with, yes, Pat?
So I just wanted to say, or check, but confirm, so the state standards for a bridge this size would be 12 feet. Yes, no?
Based upon the hydraulic study, that's what they're looking for, given the things that Archie laid out as their considerations in response to Bruce's question.
And so if that little culvert was done, it would be 8 feet plus 4 feet makes 12 feet, but it doesn't work as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's it.
Anyone else? Anything to add? This is the time. Anything you would like to close with?
I do have one thought as a citizen, which is, my friend and I have walked over the bridge a bunch of times, walked down to go look at it. It's very pretty, but you can't see it from the road. And I would love to see, again, this is speaking as a citizen, if we do work at the bridge, I'd love to see something be done so that we can, there's a place you can go to appreciate it, a bench, a walkway, something. I think that it's beautiful and it deserves to be viewed.
Okay.
If you just drive over, you wouldn't know it was there, so.
But here's what I did for my mother.
Any stills carved into anything down there?
Across the street and our.
Okay.
I would just make the comment that we went to look at the Townsend Bridge that was done. It's beautiful what you can see of it. Cannot access it to look at the whole bridge. It's really, everything is no trespassing all around it. So it's really difficult to get a full view of all the beautiful work that's done in the bridge.
I had an idea. I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea. But we've talked a lot about, people have shared what they would prioritize first and second. I wonder if we could go around the room quickly and just have everyone say what's their top priority and see what that does. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we could just run through everyone and say, I mean, I could put that slide back up that had some of those listed if people need ideas, but perhaps you already know.
Based on your list.
Yeah, or anything not on the list too, but I think that's helpful because we've heard all of these possibilities and it's hard to, you can't have everything you want. So I would be interested in an informal poll where people stand on what they think is most important.
Audience comfortable with that? Yes. Okay, Gary, let's start with you.
Jerry Horn. Yeah, I just have hold a real value to the historic structures in this town. Been involved in different things of it. Don't think we should lose sight of that, and I think we should also listen to what Brian said about, we have a natural spillway there that's to the side of the bridge that would preserve the erosion aspect or the danger of erosion to some degree. So I don't think we're in a situation where we should think that the projected flooding that we're gonna get is gonna take that bridge out. I think that's certainly an option or a consideration, but when you look at that watershed and flow from downstream, you can easily see where the water is gonna come up to a certain point and it's gonna go to the north, around and disperse down through that field.
So.
Yeah, I'd say just shout, we could go down the line and just say what you think is the most important thing.
Go from there, Maura.
Me, Maura, I said before, repair.
Jean, I would go for the 9-10 FEMA proposition. That's the 300,000 and places that will.
Pat Noga, my priorities are safety, tax burden, and the historical appearance. And I would go with a complete replacement of the stone, the FEMA 90-10, and try to reuse as much and accomplish as much of a reconstruction of the old bullet.
I believe I will echo what Jean and my wife and Dot have offered as options as what things in the long. I value history, but in this particular case, if we can maintain the character of it and get a bridge that's going to comply. And if I could interject one more thing, the reason that Emily had mentioned that the alternative 4-foot culvert was not highly recommended is I had a discussion with A&R. And My concern was if we had an issue with it, what kind of condition would it leave us in? And, I said, will you give us, because we need a permit, and the permit we're gonna have to get is from the person I talked with. And I said, well, this is an option, and we want to be fair and consider all options for the citizens of the town. And he said, well, Stan, I have had 2 other situations in the state of Vermont where he was asked to approve a similar kind of, it wasn't necessarily 4 foot, could have been a less, could have been a little bit more. He said one of them was the town of Tunbridge. I think there's a fair up there somehow, I've heard, right? And he says, I told them not to do it. He said, because what happens is 2 small culverts, whether it be 6 foot and 4 foot or 8 foot and 4 foot, will never equal the ability to handle the debris coming downstream when you have large floods. And what typically happens is things build up, they reach the height, the maximum of the main structure, and then it starts going into the other structure. The debris then goes in, that it doesn't get through the other one, it starts to go through the second one. It plugs it up. And he said, and ultimately what will happen is you'll get the flood for the primary item that you tried to prevent by putting in the additional culvert for the time and expense of it. And he said, I told them not to do it. He says, they went ahead and did it. And frankly, Stan, I'll tell you, if your town decides they want to go with a 4 foot culvert, I will not deny it. I will issue you a permit for it. But he said, you're probably going to end up regretting it. I just want people to know. And so again, my summary is, I'll go with what these 3 ladies have suggested.
So again, mine was with safety, which would be public safety meeting state standards, but in the same hand, that would also mean that the safety would involve environmental sustainability because you repair or replacing the bridge. Your FEMA grant would deal with the tax burden, maintaining the finances more efficiently, and of course the historical preservation and aesthetic appeal would be the 3rd part of it, for me.
Yeah, Buffy Smith. In terms of priorities, I think my priorities would be public safety and environmental sustainability. And I'm all for the 9 to 10 deal if we can get it.
Leanne Parker, again, safety. The environmental sustainability is important to me. But I also love looking at a beautiful stone structure. So I would hope that whatever work was done there would be done with keeping in mind the heritage of the original structure, if that's possible. But I kind of agree that breaking it down into 2 different size culverts or pass-throughs, I've just seen too much debris pile up against these smaller structures, and I would just hate to see the whole thing compromised by some large trees coming down and smashing into
You're getting safety, but I am for historic preservation of a piece of part of the bridge, and I agree which could be providing other types of branch out of FEMA would be available for historic preservation. I also think condition a historic mark and path and the historic bridge, and I think that would be an asset for Brookline going forward.
Listen.
I prioritize historic preservation, safety, which I'm highly confident and have huge trust in Mark. You know, how he has been monitoring the bridge regularly and
trust, and if there's any concern he has for anyone's safety, he'll let us go and do something about it.
Gary, I didn't mean, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, what?
No, I thought you were thinking.
Oh, now I'm sort of slow. Sorry. So I just wanted to, like, that's like with the safety piece. Like, if you do nothing or repair it, which is what I feel strongest about that, with the park continuing to monitor it. I feel safe, but I don't drive over it in like double trailer logging trucks full with logs, which I don't know how they can still go over, but they do. But, and, I think by having the historic Stone Arch Bridge, it helps our community retain its uniqueness. And that the structure is irreplaceable. For that, the aesthetic can never be replicated authentically.
Good. Gary, I didn't mean to skip over your.
Oh, I quote first.
Okay, so I want to make sure, Dan?
Yeah, I think I'm in favor of, Brian Post's option A, which is, repair the most, damage to the. For urgent, do the most urgent, really needed repairs for the existing structure. And I put this a conflict going forward, I don't know that it's in bad enough shape to merit a total rebuild at this point. Although I know we wish it, there's some lighter culvert, but I think for now the most crucial repair to get us through the next several decades safely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a president of Brookline, so we will for the most part.
You
But
have special standards.
yes, I'm just reading about speaking for us. And I think we've worked for new work, but I was part of preserving the church and preserving the ground schools. That this is something that should be preserved too. And when you're talking, if you have 10%, 9%, 20%, 80%, repairing it isn't really going to cost that much more than what you would have to pay out anyway. I'm thinking the historic piece is being people that it's monitoring, but I'm for it.
Roger.
Yes, very, very, dear now, this is really what I like.
That's not.
Look at that.
Having said that, my father was one of the last students for the school. You only had to be for the education, right? I do more than I'll ever go to college degrees. And I appreciate that, right? The church as well is a historic place. We used to go to school there, we went to one school for years. We had classes in the church, it's a special place as well as this large bridge that Fallen was part of. And certainly part of the bridge was in the historic preservation for Brookline is very key in these structures. I would go as if it's minister with the option A that has been proposed. And understanding, of course, that the field, like the all farm field, there is a natural spillway, the water that makes it so the bridge there does not have to walk all that long down in the water that exists in the whole system in the future.
Doug Howe, and, like the neighbor of Rich. And I'm the one that used to say, Jesse, Rogers over here. I have a house in West Elmsted, and we went through similar throws that you're going through with the Culp Bridge. There's a lot of controversy with that, and the historic preservation created. So I sympathize with your efforts here and very impressed with your presentations. Yeah.
Drives out. I agree with the historic preservation. You can take the finances and they come, that's good benefit. Yep.
Kim Gardner. I, we prioritize safety, but I think safety is pretty much assured of all of the options. We live in, the former Cutler Farm, just upstream from the bridge. We've been there for 75 years. And during Irene, when that stream turned into, you know, a river, the bridge was fine. Whereas, you know, other nearby towns had washed out roads and bridges and so forth. So I think, to Roger's point, you know, some of these old structures are, you know, longer lasting than new builds. And then also to Ann's point, the cost of repair may not be more and actually might be less than 10% of replacement of the replacement cost. And it's possible to get that we may be able to get grant funding to do those repairs. You know, the more we learn about the history of our home and the town, the more we love it. We've been learning more and more since Howard Cutler has been coming to visit. I really value the historic aesthetic value of the village.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn. My husband Riley and we just moved here in Council Road, so we're brand new. But I think I've said like safety, of course, during all of it sounds like I use in every option. So I think the reserve preservation is what makes it unique, and it's so beautiful to see. And I agree with Emily that it is really cool. I don't know how possible it is. I don't know who looks the land like has some sort of area and that it can be used for waves or because for the first month we lived here we had those little that it was there, and then we went to the meeting for we're talking about the stone bridge or this one stone bridge, and she's like, you drive over it every day when you come to my house, and I was like, I have no idea, and it loved it, it's gorgeous. So I think, you know, money is a factor. I think the repairs sound like that could be a really good compromise for all the things that are needed. It sounds like there's confidence there that it would preserve the historicness of it and not spend much money.
I'm John Harris. I think that both historic preservation and fire sustainability is very important. And I think they both can be done with the strong structure from the solar grid at the end, able in the past about decade from the north to the south, the state and the side. The one thing that I want to add is that I am extremely skeptical that this project will get FEMA money, even the money is part of the state, because the northern part of the state, there are probably more pressing needs, so that even if there's money in the state, that this project may not be a priority. So I would recommend repair the meal section, because I think that's more realistic and more viable for us.
I still think that I live close to the bridge. We're still alive. When I bought my house, I didn't know the bridge was there. And I was totally surprised and learning today as I discovered it after the year. I think historic innovation is my priority. And through my conversation with both Elon and Post and Mark, I feel that any safety issues going to be addressed through repairs at this time. I don't feel as though there's any need to replace any. I think repairs is definitely. I see that both that big man in my house, my yard, and I know it can a lot of water flowing down that hill. I haven't yet seen anything that's over top of the bridge.
I can understand. I, I go to the historic, I think just repair, and I also listen to people that have run the select board and done and been on these hours of meetings, stuff, and they're all sort of getting towards the bigger repair, so. I guess I kind of feel like I'm in the middle of to each other, so. I don't go to all the meetings and spend all that time, but I certainly respect the people that do. Especially like, Archie having that history of. Maybe we should go with a big fix, but then I also worry that the FEMA money might not be there, so, I don't think I have some. Great answer. I do wonder if it is it gonna be decided by this group where we go next, or will it? We can put this on the website and somehow get more of a flow. Or what's your next steps before you go back to FEMA?
I think this is a select board decision ultimately. In my perfect world, we would know exactly what everybody would like to, how it would like us to vote. But it's probably not gonna happen. So this is one way to collect some of that feeling and information and
So that's not to say though, Marjorie, that it couldn't be put up for a town vote in a special article. I mean, that's possible. And sometimes select boards choose to do that just because they're uncertain as to what people want to have done. So.
But we're also under a
But
time.
I'm not speaking for the board when I say that. I'm just saying from a purely theoretical standpoint, it is a possibility. To do. More.
I just want to address the people saying putting like maybe chairs or something down there. I know that on the side that's beautiful, the people that own it, is it the Martins? I'm sure that they'd be okay with that if talked to, and I'm pretty sure we own the other side of it and Tim owns, like, we own part of it in abutment and we would be okay with that too. People park there and we don't care, like, whatever. So.
Yeah.
Here.
I think that we shouldn't be convinced that enlarging the flow area under the bridge from 8 feet to 12 is going to be a sure thing. When you look up that little valley right there where Cutler drains out of, it's heavily wooded. And depending on the event, it could get a 12-foot area, it could get plugged just as easily as an 8-footer. So I'm for preserving what's there and hoping that it comes. I just see, watching what happened in North Carolina, Montpelier, and the towns up north. Big things come down that flow and can plug bridges and culverts at will. So it's not an end all answer to this fall the size of the culvert up.
The
Could I get more clarification on what repair means?
So, the repair option that Brian talked about in his report would include rebuilding the south wall of the center section. It's where that big stone is displaced. I think they dig through the road bed and they rebuild that. I'm an expert, so I'm not gonna get any more detail than that. We would also rebuild all 4 of the wing walls. I think one of them's in okay shape, but the other 3 are not, so we might as well do the whole thing. And possibly add some concrete below the concrete section where water is flowing under. That's more of a minor repair. What was not included in this was repointing. The adding mortar back in between the stones, it's almost all gone. It was not included because you need to do both sides. If you just repoint from the inside of the bridge, water will come through the stones and then get stuck there, and that's worse than not doing it at all. So to repoint it properly, you have to do it on the top that's covered by the road and everywhere, which is quite expensive. So that would not be included in this option.
And could you restate how much the estimated cost would be and?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add, Brian posts, revised assessment report based on his 2 visits through the bridge, one, I think February, 1 in May. It's a 10-page document that's, posted on the town website. Under documents, if you want to take a look at it, it's very interesting read. He breaks down the, and what would be involved there and the other relative.
So this is on the town site.
Yes.
Anyone else?
I'd like to know what Mark has to say. It takes a while, but he's got no choice. Sorry, Mark.
Anything you looked at?
Well, I feel caught in the middle of being a really fair guy.
Then you don't have to say anything.
Well, I want to speak, and I want to speak. I have a love of history. The older I get, the more I love the history. Reading how we got here, and who's responsible for getting us here, and I think the stone arch is a work of art, and it survived quite a few floods. I mean, not just 2011, 2021, 2022. There's been a lot of floods that's probably gone through since it was built. And I think the concrete section, yes, it's different than the stone, but I think that's helped to preserve the stone. It's just kept the water pressure off the other stone. And then I've got lots of pictures of it where I've been looking. Brookline has many stone structures in town that were here before culverts were invented. And some really nice work has been done. And I feel bad that when FEMA came and looked, if they didn't recognize that it was a historical stone structure and put more effort into some sort of preservation there. So I'm probably rambling, but I read the history of stone arches. They've been around since the Roman days, and some of them are still standing. The more weight you put on one of these arches, the stronger it gets. And if you look at the church and you look over the windows, the bricks are arches. They're strength over the large windows and doors. So it really has proven itself. I've read about Mr. Follett, and he was a Civil War veteran, lived in Townsend, and made his way to Louisiana, back to Gettysburg, where he fought the Civil War. And met his brother there, younger brother. His brother didn't come home. But anyway, Mr. Follett somehow learned his stone trade. It's a historical marker to the town. I feel like it was brought up before the church, the Brown Schoolhouse. It's a piece of history. And I think everybody's grandfather that has a name in the town is responsible for having a hand in it. So I feel if it's possible, a way to preserve it as long as we can and do what it takes. I mean, like I echo Carrie Bourne, we can replace it with a 12-footer, 15-footer or a bridge. And who's to say that's not gonna wash out? Tim even came up with this. If you continue down Hill Road easterly from the stone arch structure, the next water crossing you come to is a replaced box culvert. And I'm not sure the exact date without looking it up, when that was replaced. And that originally that was just a small culvert under Hill Road. And it was replaced with a concrete box culvert. And there was a rear swamp blew out and all the water that came down and all the debris plugged that new box culvert. And it took the road out on each side of it for hundreds of, yards deep. So that proves to me that bigger's not always the answer. And so I feel like if there's a way that we can preserve some history and have it recognized, I'm in that favor. Looking inside the stone arch, I see it's been brought up that it's not uniform all the way through. And I've done some stonework and I realize how hard it is to place a large stone. Once it's tumbled into place, it's pretty hard to maneuver it. Not that it's not possible. And so I know the effort that goes into stonework. And if you look at where the newer concrete structure meets the middle section that's not so perfect, you'll see the concrete was molded to each stone. And those stones that are imperfectionly shaped haven't molded. Concrete would show chipping, breaking of concrete that were extremely the problem. So even though it doesn't look as perfect as the 14-foot section, and it still looks to me the same as it did after 211 when I crawled through. And I've got pictures looking up and down that still appear to be, they look like they haven't changed. And I'm all about safety, it's my job. So I want to ensure that it is safe, for school buses, fire trucks, everybody out there in the crossing. And I'm feeling like there's still a lot of good light left in this structure. It's like I say, it's proved itself. If we do get a high water event and the water does go over the road, it goes back into the brook. And until we see the concrete leaning or the stones falling out, I think there's still some time left that you can work on this. FEMA money it's only an option. If we didn't have the FEMA option, we probably wouldn't be talking about this today. We still let it do its thing. And I realize we have to make a decision whether to utilize FEMA money or let it go. And then we do have a lot of good options. And so my gut feeling and my love of history, love to see it repaired. Now the water that's seeping through from the inlet end is coming through fieldstone, so-called wing walls, and it's getting around and back underneath and flowing through. And in one of Brian's repairs, he mentioned he could dig that all up, use a rubber membrane to create a wing wall, and then put the stonework back so that the water can't bleed through and dissolve the fines through the stonework. And I mean, that's a lot of money for repairs to something, state standards
when all these were built, there was no state standards, and over time, it's starting to become the standards. And standards even have changed over time. What was standards 30 years ago is now changed, upgraded. We've, as following state standards for the town, work, we cannot install anything less than 18 inches under a road. And I have a feeling as time goes on, that's gonna jump to 2 foot minimum diameter. That's the way things are happening, so. You know, if we invest $300,000, is that our answer? It probably would help, but I think, I still think there's a lot of life left in what's there. And I'd say I don't mind monitoring the thing regular if I see something. But the big question of the day is, what do we want to tell FEMA? Would they help us pay for repairs or would we not? Is replacing it with stone arch larger or concrete structure the answer? So I don't have that answer, but that is my opinion. Structure.
Okay. First thing, I would echo Dan. If you get a chance, I would download and watch that report that's on the website. It's really good. I've read it 4 times. Guy did an amazing job of helping us to understand what was going on. But that's the first thing. The second thing, I'm so impressed with everybody here today and the input. It's way better than I thought it was gonna be a slugfest. I even held up a fiasco before I got here. Oh, that was fun. Oh,
No, yeah.
it's not. But anyway, I would be a total hypocrite if I didn't respect the historic piece of this building, especially in light of what I've done to try to improve these buildings here in town. And the people that are in this building right now that have history going back to when they were born. So that's a big deal for me. Then I had to witness all of this, which I, like I said, read 3 or 4 times, and listen to the people that all you and the people that count, the people that do the work. And I've been pretty torn as to which way to go. I listened to Archie and I listened to what he said about not the repair because we're going to be doing it again in 10 or 15 years. And I really respect Archie. He's been doing this a very, very long time. He's has extreme experience. And this man right here, boy, respect to no end. So where am I going with this? I think Kerry had a point, and I thought of this morning and last night about the spillway. When reading the report, the north is in good shape. The north is in good shape. This is what I was reading on that report. So that's why I raised a question about the additional culvert, the bypass culvert. I wanted to see a response to it. And I'm not so sure that that would not be a bad idea somewhere down the road as a piece to help us mitigate a large amount of water if we had a really major event. Saying all that, I don't think we have the Atlantic Ocean here coming into the center section of there. That structure's been there 125 years. So we will have maintenance down the line if we rebuild it. I was very there, excuse me. And after reading all of what Brian said, I was in favor of the repair. And then when I was listening to Archie, I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we should go that route of don't repair, replace the bridge. And then I'm thinking, well, like Mark said, we're gonna put those stoves back in the original condition. It's gonna look like it was 125 years ago. Frankly, I tend to doubt. Am I gonna be sitting there with a couple other people, Stan and anybody else who wants to 24 or the time that they're wait, if that stone doesn't go there? I guess what I'm referring to is I'd like to see the original historic structure kept intact. Brian made some really good points about the water going around the wing walls, seeping into the middle section. And then I'm hearing Mark, what he has to say about you can have the largest culvert in the world, so that still could get clogged. But given the nature of everything there, I think I'm swinging back towards the repair part. Now, this all depends on what FEMA's gonna do, you know that. But let's be realistic. We're looking at $100,000. This 68 stuff, I don't believe for a second. We all here pay a lot of bills, and we know it's gonna be the high end. So how it all pans out when we put this out for an RFP, it could come up to 110,000, 120,000.
The thing is, you could then.
Not much. Not much, because like Emily has stated, we talked for 45 minutes last night. We have to react to this. You're right, Emily. If we sit on this, and you said, if I quote you, I'm paraphrasing, like other towns have sat on it and waited, and then they lost the opportunity. I don't think that's a good move. I'd rather be in a position where we have been given an answer and then we change our mind, rather than not moving forward. So I think that's not a good approach. I think we should make a decision as a board very shortly and move forward. It appears to me that the town, this group of people have spoken as to how they want it. And now we all have to sit down and figure and agree about that and move forward.
Right, I spent a comment that, so the select board, we're gonna have plenty of time to debate this amongst ourselves. And the main thing, we've accomplished the main thing today, which is get the feedback from the folks. Folks understand what we're dealing with. We've got the feedback from the folks. I think we ought to adjourn and we will pick it up and discuss those things. I share a lot of those thoughts.
Great.
Everybody out in the audience feel like they've had a chance to say their piece, as well as, do you feel like you're leaving here more educated than when you walked in? Okay. That was the first. Good. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to thank Emily and Emily primarily because that was a big task she did, putting a lot of information into a nice presentation.
Nice work, Emily.
To reiterate, Stan has been our lead on this and other things. He is our go-to source. He's got the expertise and
He's newly retired.
he will continue to be our point as long as he wants to.
So, a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? In
All in
favor?
favor, adjourn.
Aye.
Okay.
Anybody opposed?
Thank you, David, for your help today. Thank you.
All right.